You speak a word of what I'm about to show you, you will be executed.
It's beautiful. It's the greatest encryption device in history. The Germans use it for all major communications.
Everyone thinks Enigma is unbreakable.
Let me try, and we'll know for sure.
Gentlemen, meet Mr. Turing.
We to work together then. I'm afraid these men would only slow me down.
Popular at school, were you?
We're short on staff.
We get more staff then. You have 6 minutes to complete the task.
Is anything possible?
No, it takes me 8. 5 minutes and 34 seconds.
You said to do it in under 6.
I'm designing a machine that will allow us to break every message, every day, instantly.
Hello, Benedict. I'm so pleased to see you here in London for your new movie, The Imitation Game. So, first of all, you play on a mathematician who tried to crack the Enigma code during the World War II. Is it a true story? So, did you know something about this story before the shooting?
I did, yeah. I did know the story a little bit from the play Breaking the Code that Derek Jacobi starred in as Turing, and I knew a little bit probably from school, but not nearly as much as I knew after reading the script and then going into it in detail. And Andrew Hodges' biography in particular, which is obviously what the book that we based a lot of the scripts on. If you made this up as a drama, you probably get a studio executive going, no, I'm sorry, there's too much in this. You can't have somebody who's the father of modern computer science cracking a German code with algorithms that are then still used in Google search engines, then being prosecuted in the 50s and given a sentence of either 2 years imprisonment or chemical castration and committing suicide.
Welcome to Enigma. The details of every surprise attack, every secret convoy, and every U-boat in the bloody Atlantic go into that thing, and out comes gibberish.
It's beautiful. The great tragedy of this man's life, this extraordinary human being, is that despite all of that, he's relatively unknown in comparison to those achievements and that standing. And you know, for me, if this film does anything, it's just to broaden the understanding and knowledge of him and bring him to a wider audience, bring his life, his work, his achievements, and his personality, and you know, this tragic outcome of his life to a broader audience. And that would help to serve his legacy. And as a storyteller telling, you know, a real life story, that's the most you can hope for.
So to prepare this role, did you make some research? You read some books or you met some people?
Yeah, I only really had books to go on. I met a few people. I was very fortunate to meet a few people, a couple of relatives, but they knew him as kids. But even that gave me a little bit of more of a human insight. There were wonderful stories they told me about him playing chess with his back turned to the board, and just also more importantly, being really comfortable as children in his presence, not being talked down to, not being treated as something that should be seen and not heard, but actually as an equal. And that gave me a huge clue into who he was, and also probably what he felt an affinity towards as far as what children represented for him, which was a time of innocence for him, to being a homosexual young man and not having a place in society where that was tolerated. So that was a real clue in on a very sort of personal level, I guess. And then a wonderful colleague who worked with him in Manchester told me a little bit about what just one anecdote that really stuck in my mind about him when he was going through the hormonal treatment. The doctor had apparently said to him, look, this is getting a bit embarrassing, these weekly injections. Why don't I give you a slow release device and put it in your leg, and it will stop dosing you after 2 years is over. The colleague he was telling this story to said, but hang on, but that was ages ago. Is it still dosing? He went, yes, it is. Not really cricket, is it? And sort of walked away smiling. That same man, and he also talks about how loving he was of the staff, how generous, how he was a good team worker, how he was incredibly collaborative. And you have to be in his field of science. This idea of him being a difficult genius who's off in his corner, you know, it's part of the storytelling of the film of how he becomes human again through Joan.
Is anything possible?
No. It takes me 8. This isn't about crossword puzzles, it's about how one approaches solving an impossible problem. Do you tackle the whole thing at once or divide it into small? You finished?
Yes.
Five minutes and 34 seconds.
You said to do it in under 6.
So tell me, could you describe your character? This guy lives a little bit his own world, no?
In general, that was another thing that really drew me to him. He's not somebody who's autistic or has Asperger's. He's somebody who's shaped by his experiences and continually being shaped by them. There's no audio, there's no visual, there's nothing filmed of him. So it's anecdotal. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but it's all written. And the people I did speak to, like I said, were either very young or had a very sort of limited association with him, but spoke so highly of him. And yeah, I mean, he could be difficult and cantankerous and all the rest of it, but the amount of people that told me how lovely he was, charming, funny, how engaging he was when he locked in with you and talked with you, and he'd listen, he was a really good listener. I don't know, I sort of fell in love with him a bit the more I got to know about him, and it was really hard filming those last scenes of the film, and I realised, it's strange actually, it's the first time I've ever had it that I wasn't acting in character. I started with the first few takes at least I was sort of uncontrollably emotional, and I realised I was grieving him. I was grieving the person I got to know over the course of researching and playing and filming our story of it. And yeah, I had to sort of take a step back and move away from that and try and get back into his mindset. And yeah, it was a real privilege to play the man.
That's what you're doing here, the top secret program at Bletchley. You're trying to break the German Enigma machine.
What makes you think that?
It's the greatest encryption device in history, and the Germans use it for all major communications. If the Allies broke Enigma, well, this would turn into a very short war indeed. Of course, that's what you're working on. But you also haven't got anywhere with it. If you had, you wouldn't be hiring cryptographers out of university. You need me a lot more than I need you.
What do you think about the motivation of this guy? I mean, he did that for his country or for himself, in fact?
I think he'd be the first to say it wasn't an act of patriotism. I think for him it was more a question of solving a ridiculously complex puzzle.
I like solving problems, Commander. And Enigma is the most difficult problem in the world.
No, Enigma isn't difficult, it's impossible. The Americans, the Russians, the French, the Germans, everyone thinks Enigma is unbreakable.
Good. Let me try, and we'll know for sure, won't we?
And also, I think that was probably encouraged in the sense that it takes the emotional heat out of it. Not that that wouldn't have existed anyway with the varying elements that were in play at Bletchley. I mean, this was a time of deepening crisis during the war. We were an island and we were getting starved. You know, convoys and merchant ships were being sunk by U-boats, as is in the film. You know, this is all explained. But there was a real siege beginning, actually, and people were starving. We were running out of resources, and then we had the Blitz. It was a very, very, very crucial moment in the war.
To pull off this genius routine, one actually has to be a genius.
Why are you building the machine?
The machine will allow us to break every message and win the war.
His approach to being a scientist in general was very much one problem to another. It was one of the reasons he didn't get as much sort of celebrity or recognition, at least for his work, in his lifetime. I mean, he did from known quarters, Newman and others in Princeton and here as well, when he wrote his first paper on computable numbers, which made such a huge stir in the scientific community, this idea of mechanizing maths, of creating something that was actually a machine that could perform functions on varying degrees of programming and software that could basically come up with a result. I mean, basically the blueprint for modern computers.
He created an unbelievable machine. You think maybe it was the first Steve Jobs, this guy, and maybe maybe with this machine it was like the first computer?
If he'd stuck on that, or even his work on artificial intelligence, or his work on his algorithm works, the algorithm work he did with programming, he could have made the sort of Nobel Prize level of scientific recognition, I think. But he wasn't interested in that. He was sort of really... I don't even know if it was an act of selflessness rather than just not being interested, really. Just wanting to move and progress his work forward, and whatever took his interest, he'd obsessively focus on next. And, you know, a unique mind, a really unique mind, and much undervalued at the time, I think, in retrospect, and you know, that's one of the reasons, like I said, to want to bring this story to life, is so that his achievements as well as what he endured are brought to light and celebrated and recognised.
Alan, you do not have to do this alone.
What if I don't fancy her in that way?
Can't tell anyone, Alan. It's illegal. You could help us. but you won't.
I'm just a mathematician.
Sometimes it is the people who no one imagines anything of who do the things that no one can imagine.
Alan Turing was gay. I mean, being gay in 1940 was so difficult. You mean it because was gay the reason the English government don't recognize the work of this guy?
I think it might be part of it. You know, his private life had to be worked out in secret. His professional life for 35 years, supposedly after the war and during the war, obviously, had to be kept secret. And, you know, he had a fascination with secrets from a very early age, with coding, with the idea of creating an alternate language that could be understood between him and a friend, Christopher Morcom, and that kind of cocooned and sealed him, I think, as somebody who could was very used to, rather, operating in isolation. But the best moments in his life, I think, are always those moments where he's brought out of himself by other people, whether it was falling in love with Christopher or his relationship with Joan, and that's very clear in the film. It was very important to us, for us to recognise as well. You know, No Man's an Island, even though his work was spectacularly focused and, you know, very particular and singular, he again, even the results of his theorising, he couldn't carry through anything that he had in his head as far as computer sciences go without a team of technicians and engineers. And, you know, we have testimony that he worked incredibly well with some, not all. There were some that he didn't get on with or found him a bit sort of troublesome or hard work or impossible, but apart from personality clashes or different sort of approaches to work, you know, he wouldn't have been able to achieve what he achieved if he wasn't able to work with other people.
The boys, we're going to get some lunch. Alan?
Yes?
I said we're going to get some lunch. Alan?
Yes?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I said we're off to get some lunch. This is starting to get a little bit repetitive.
What is?
I had asked if you wanted to come to lunch with us.
No, you didn't. You said you were going to get some lunch.
Have I offended you in some way?
Why would you think that?
Would you like to come to lunch with us?
What time's lunchtime?
Christ, Alan, it's a bleeding sandwich.
What is?
Lunch.
Oh, I don't like sandwiches.
Never mind.
It's a very interesting question about what really motivated him. I think his work ethic was utterly born out of his love for this boy, Christopher, who was a little older than him, and he felt a lot smarter, and he was already achieving academically more than Alan was at the time. And so in a way, out of that tragedy was born this extraordinarily focused mind who was already rather brilliant in particular and lateral in its thinking, but just evolved into this machine, this person who wouldn't stop, and was, yeah, like I said earlier, just this singular focus. And I think that was what was beautiful for me as an actor, being way too stupid and far from any kind of reach of understanding the pure math, let alone the less convoluted science, I mean, or circuitry. I mean, there's so much complexity to his work. But what I could completely understand and marry with my or anyone's life experience, because it's a universally human thing, is the idea that you are conditioned and influenced by people, motivated by people, and not working in isolation. So, I don't know, I guess at some point maybe he was motivated by what was going on in his country.
R. O.
T.
T. A.
A.
H.
H.
Q.
Q.
U. Even in the darkest moments of the end of his life, he was working on morphogenesis whilst his body was undergoing this horrible cellular, emotional, intellectual, you know, his faculty was, all of it being restructured and destroyed or altered. And he was studying that very phenomenon in cells, the effect of environment in mutating cells and how cells adapt to new conditions. I mean, you know, a miraculous man to turn that into something positive and bring it to the world in the form of scientific discourse.
Have you decrypted a single German message?
You will
Never understand the importance of what I am creating here. Our patience has expired. No!
A wonderful person to play, and, you know, an extraordinary story and a wonderful, wonderful arc to the whole of him. You know, meet him, he's utterly unapologetic about who he is and the way he is at the beginning. And it's sort of slightly startling, especially for Dennis and for Charles Dance's character, this sort of authority figure. But what's beautiful about how it evolves is you understand more and more and more what made him the person you meet at the beginning of the film. And that was a real treat to layer that in with confidence at the beginning and just present him as he is, and then slowly show his vulnerability, show where he's and how he learnt and why he learnt. And it's a great script, very, very funny as well. Like I said, I mean, something that was a joy to play on every level. So yeah, a great job.
Merci beaucoup, Benedict. Thank you very much, Benedict, and I hope to see you in LA end of February in the red carpet, okay?
Cool, okay, we'll hopefully meet you there, we'll see. All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.